The needle slipped from Zander Marlowe's fingers for the third time in as many minutes, and he cursed under his breath as he bent to retrieve it from the wooden floor of his shop. His hands had not stopped trembling since the orc woman had walked through his door 20 minutes ago, her armor clanking with each heavy step, her emerald skin catching the afternoon light that streamed through his windows. She stood in the center of his tailor shop now, massive and still as a mountain, her dark eyes watching him with an intensity that made his mouth go dry. "I need a dress," she had said, her voice deeper than any woman's he had ever heard, rough around the edges like gravel being ground beneath a boot. "Something proper, for humans." Zander had nearly fainted. In the 3 years since he had taken over his father's shop in this frontier village, he had never encountered an orc, much less one seeking his services. The war had ended 5 years ago, but the memory of it still hung over the borderlands like morning fog. Orcs were enemies. Everyone knew that. They were raiders and killers who came down from the mountains to burn and pillage. They were not customers. They certainly did not wear dresses. "I can pay," the orc woman added, and her hand moved to a leather pouch at her belt. The motion made Zander flinch, though she was merely reaching for coins. She noticed, and her expression darkened. "I will not hurt you, human." "I did not think you would," Zander lied, his voice coming out higher than he intended. He cleared his throat and forced himself to stand straighter, trying to summon the professional dignity his father had always maintained, even with the most difficult customers. "Forgive me. You simply surprised me. We do not often have visitors from the mountains." "I am not visiting," she said flatly. "I am staying. I bought the old Hendricks farm 3 miles north. I plan to work the land." Zander's mind reeled at this information. The Hendricks farm had been abandoned for 2 years, ever since old Thomas Hendricks had died and his children had moved east to the cities. It was good land, but it required hard work to bring it back to productivity. That an orc would attempt such a thing was beyond comprehension. That she would do it alone was madness. "I see," he managed. "And you require a dress for this farming." "I require a dress so the humans in this village will stop looking at me like I am going to eat their children," she said, and there was something almost weary in her tone. "I thought perhaps if I dressed like you, if I tried to fit in, they might give me a chance. I was wrong to wear armor into town. I see that now." Zander looked at her properly then, really looked at her, and saw past the initial shock of green skin and small tusks protruding from her lower jaw. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and arms corded with muscle that spoke of years of hard training and harder living. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple braid that fell to the middle of her back. Her face was angular and strong with high cheekbones and a broad nose. She wore battered plate armor over a leather tunic and a sword hung at her hip. She looked exactly like what she was, a warrior, but her eyes held something else, something softer. Uncertainty, perhaps. Hope, maybe. Fear, definitely. "What is your name?" Zander asked, surprising himself with the question. She hesitated as if she had not expected him to care. "Gora. Gora Ironheart, though the second name is just what my warband called me. I have no family name now. No family. I left my clan to come here. They did not approve of my choice. Orcs do not become farmers. We are warriors, raiders, conquerors. To choose peace, to choose solitude and soil over glory and battle is to choose shame. So I am alone." She said it without self-pity, merely stating a fact, but Zander felt something twist in his chest at the loneliness in those words. "I am Zander," he said. "Zander Marlowe. This was my father's shop. He taught me the trade before he passed." "I am sorry for your loss," Gora said, and she sounded like she meant it. "It has been 3 years. I manage." Zander took a breath, steadying himself. His hands were still shaking, but he forced them to be still through sheer will. "A dress, then. I will need to take measurements. And I will need to know what sort of dress you want. Something practical for farm work or something finer for when you come to town." "Both," Gora said. "If you can make both, I will pay for both. I have gold. I earned it in battle before I left." Zander nodded slowly. His mind was already working through the logistics. He had never made anything for someone of her size or build before. Everything he knew about tailoring was designed for human proportions. But cloth was cloth and measurements were measurements. He could do this. He had to do this. Not just because she was a paying customer, though his business could always use the coin, but because something about her quiet desperation touched him. She was trying so hard to be accepted, to build a life here. The least he could do was help her dress for it. "Very well," he said, and he picked up his measuring tape. "Please remove your armor. I will need to take accurate measurements of your frame." Gora unbuckled her sword belt first, setting the weapon aside with obvious reluctance. Then she began removing her armor, piece by piece. The breastplate came off first, revealing the leather tunic beneath, stained with sweat and worn soft from years of use. The pauldrons followed, then the vambraces and greaves. She worked with the efficiency of someone who had donned and doffed armor 1,000 times, until finally she stood before him in just the tunic and breeches, looking somehow smaller without the metal shell, more vulnerable. "I will need you to remove the tunic as well," Zander said, then immediately felt his face burn. "Not entirely. Just enough that I can measure your shoulders and torso properly. You can keep your undergarments." Gora pulled the tunic over her head without apparent embarrassment, revealing a simple cloth binding wrapped around her chest and her powerful torso. Her green skin was marked here and there with scars, some old and silvered, others newer and still slightly pink. Each one told a story of battle, of survival. Zander tried not to stare as he approached with his measuring tape, but it was difficult. He had never been this close to an orc before. He could smell her now, a scent like leather and iron and something earthy, like rain on stone. His hands shook again as he lifted the tape to her shoulders, and he silently cursed his own weakness. But Gora stood perfectly still, her breathing slow and even, her eyes fixed on some point on the far wall. She was being patient with him, he realized. She understood his fear and was trying not to make it worse. "Shoulders," he murmured, reading the measurement and committing it to memory. "Chest, waist, hips." He worked methodically, trying to focus on the numbers and not on the warmth of her skin or the power he could feel in her frame. She was built like no woman he had ever measured, all muscle and solid strength, but there was still a distinctness to her waist, a curve to her hips that would need to be accounted for in the design. "How tall are you?" he asked. 6.5 feet near enough, she said. "Taller than most orc women, though not by much. And your feet?" He looked down at her heavy boots. "Large," she said with something that might have been humor. "I have broken many human chairs by accident." Zander found himself almost smiling at that. "I will make sure the dress is sturdy then. No point in creating something that will not last." "That is good. I value things that last." She paused, then added, "That is why I chose farming. Battles end, victory fades. But land, if you care for it, if you tend it properly, will feed you for a lifetime." "A wise philosophy," Zander said, and he meant it. He measured her arms, then her inseam for the length of the skirts. "You can dress again. I have what I need." Gora pulled her tunic back on, then began reassembling her armor with the same practiced efficiency. "How long will it take?" "A week, perhaps 2. I will need to order more cloth. I do not keep enough on hand for a project of this size." He hesitated, then asked, "What colors do you prefer?" She blinked as if the question surprised her. I do not know. I have only ever worn armor and leathers. What colors do human women wear? All kinds. Blue is popular. Green, though that might be odd with your skin tone. Yellow, red, brown, purple. It depends on the occasion and the personal preference. Blue, Gora decided after a moment. Dark blue like the sky just before full night. I always like that color. It reminds me of peace. Dark blue it is then, Zander said. For the practical dress, perhaps something in brown or gray, something that will not show every bit of dirt from the farm. Yes, that is wise. She counted out coins from her pouch, far more than he would have asked for, and set them on his counter. Is this enough? Zander looked at the small pile of gold and silver. This is more than enough. I will return the extra when you collect the dresses. Keep it, Gora said. Consider it payment for your trouble. I know I am not an easy customer. You are fine, Zander said, and was surprised to find he meant it. The fear had not entirely left him, but it had diminished, pushed aside by curiosity and something else he could not quite name. Come back in 2 weeks. I will have something ready for you by then. Gora nodded, then picked up her sword belt and strapped it back on. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. Thank you, Zander Marlowe. You are the first human here who has not run from me or spat at my feet. I will remember that. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click, leaving Zander alone in his shop with a pile of coins and a head full of measurements. He sat down heavily in his work chair and let out a long breath. His hands had finally stopped shaking. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work. Zander ordered the cloth from a traveling merchant, paying extra for rush delivery, and when it arrived he set to work immediately. Cutting patterns for Gora's size was a challenge, but he had always enjoyed puzzles. He worked late into the night by lamplight, his needle flashing as he stitched seams and hemmed edges. He made the practical dress first, a simple design in sturdy gray cotton with long sleeves and a full skirt that would not impede movement. He reinforced the seams and added extra fabric in the shoulders and back to accommodate her broader frame. For the nicer dress, he used a deep blue linen that felt soft and fine under his fingers. This one he made with more care, adding small details. A modest neckline edged with darker blue thread, sleeves that could be rolled up or left long, a fitted bodice that would show her figure without being improper, a skirt that fell in clean lines to her ankles. He was proud of his work when he finished, prouder than he had been of anything in a long time. Gora returned exactly 2 weeks later, in the morning this time, and she was not wearing her armor. Instead, she wore a simple leather vest over her tunic, and her sword was conspicuously absent. She looked uncomfortable without it, her hand occasionally drifting to her empty hip as if reaching for a weapon that was not there. I thought I should not wear the armor, she explained when she saw him notice. You said humans found it frightening. It is not the armor that frightens them, Zander said gently. It is old fears, old grudges, but I appreciate the effort. He gestured to the back room. Come, try these on and we will see if they fit. He had hung both dresses on a rack in the back, and Gora stared at them as if they were foreign objects, which in a sense they were. She reached out and touched the blue one with surprising delicacy, her thick fingers tracing the line of the bodice. They are beautiful, she said softly. I did not expect them to be beautiful. All my work is beautiful, Zander said with mock offense, and was rewarded with a huff that might have been a laugh. Try the gray one first. If the fit is right on that, the blue should be as well since I used the same measurements. Gora nodded and took the dress behind a screen in the corner. Zander heard the rustle of cloth, then a long silence, then more rustling. Finally, she emerged and Zander felt his breath catch. The dress fit her perfectly. The gray cotton draped over her powerful frame in a way that did not hide her strength, but somehow made it seem more graceful, more intentional. The skirt swirled around her legs as she walked, and the bodice sat properly on her shoulders without straining. She looked down at herself with an expression of wonder, turning slowly to see how the fabric moved. "How does it feel?" Zander asked. "Strange," Gora admitted. "Light. I am used to weight, to armor pressing on my shoulders. This feels like wearing nothing at all." "That is the point. Can you move freely? Bend down, reach up. Do the things you would do on the farm." Gora tested the dress through a series of movements, bending to mimic picking something from the ground, reaching overhead as if gathering apples from a tree, walking back and forth across the small room. The dress accommodated all of it without tearing or restricting her. "It is good," she declared. "Better than good. It is perfect." "Try the blue one now," Zander urged, eager to see if his finer work had paid off. Gora disappeared behind the screen again, and when she emerged this time, Zander forgot to breathe entirely. The deep blue brought out the richness of her green skin, creating a contrast that was striking and lovely. The dress hugged her torso in a way that was modest but flattering, and the skirt fell in elegant folds that made her look taller, more regal. She looked like she belonged in a lord's hall, not a frontier tailor's shop. "Gora," Zander said, his voice coming out hoarse. "You look beautiful." She froze, her eyes going wide. "You do not have to lie to me. I know what I am." "I am not lying." He stood and crossed to her, looking up at her face because even with the advantage of her being several inches shorter without her boots, she still towered over him. "You are beautiful. The dress is beautiful. Together, you are stunning." Gora's green skin somehow darkened, a flush rising in her cheeks. She looked away, her hands twisting in the fabric of the skirt. "No one has ever called me beautiful before." "Then no one has ever really looked at you," Zander said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. It surprised him how much he meant it. 2 weeks ago, he had been terrified of her. Now, standing close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, he felt no fear at all. Only a strange, fluttering warmth in his chest that he did not have a name for. "I will take both," Gora said, her voice rough with emotion she was clearly trying to hide. "Thank you, Zander, truly. This means more to me than you know. I am glad I could help." He handed her a bag for the gray dress after she changed back into her leather tunic and vest. "Keep the blue one on if you like. Walk through town in it. Show them you are more than they think." Gora hesitated, then nodded. "I will, but I should change my boots at least. These are too heavy for such a fine dress." "I know a cobbler who could make you proper shoes," Zander offered. "If you like, I could speak to him. He is a good man. He will not refuse you if I vouch for you." "You would do that? Vouch for me?" "I would," Zander said, and realized it was true. In 2 brief meetings, Gora had somehow become more than a strange customer. She had become someone he wanted to help, to see succeed. "You are trying to build a life here. That takes courage. You deserve support, not scorn." Gora looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then I accept, and I thank you again, Zander Marlowe. You are a good man." She left wearing the blue dress, walking out into the morning sunshine with her head high and her shoulders back. Zander watched her go from his doorway and saw heads turn all along the street. People stared, pointed, whispered, but Gora did not flinch. She walked through the village like a queen, and the dress moved with her like water, like sky, like something beautiful and untouchable. Zander found himself smiling as he returned to his work. Something had changed in him, he realized. The world felt a little bit wider, a little bit brighter than it had before Gora walked into his shop. He did not see her again for nearly a month, though he heard about her. The village buzzed with gossip. The orc woman was working the Hendricks farm, clearing fields and repairing fences. The orc woman had come to the general store to buy seed, paying in gold and speaking politely. The orc woman had helped a farmer whose wagon had broken down on the north road, lifting it with her bare hands while he repaired the wheel. The stories were always told with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant admiration. No one trusted her, but they could not deny she was trying. Zander vouched for her with the cobbler, a gruff older man named Petter, and a week later Petter reported that Gora had come by and been fitted for 2 pairs of proper boots. "Strange feet," Petter had said, shaking his head. "Wider than human, longer toes, but I managed." She paid well and was more polite than half my human customers. Summer deepened into full bloom, and Zander's shop stayed busy with the usual work, mending torn shirts, letting out waistbands, creating new garments for travelers passing through. But he found his thoughts drifting often to Gora, wondering how she was faring on her farm, whether the dresses were holding up, whether she was making any progress in winning over the wary villagers. Then one afternoon, she appeared in his doorway again, and Zander's heart did an odd little skip in his chest. She wore the gray dress, now showing signs of hard use, dirt stains on the hem, a small tear in the sleeve that had been crudely repaired. But she was smiling, a small shy expression that transformed her face. "Hello, Zander," she said. "I have come to commission more dresses if you are willing, and I have brought you something as thanks." She held out a cloth-wrapped bundle, and when Zander took it, he found it warm. He unwrapped it carefully and discovered fresh bread, a whole loaf, crusty and golden and smelling like heaven. "I have been practicing," Gora explained, looking almost embarrassed. "I am not very good at cooking yet, but the bread turned out well this time. I thought you might like it." "I love bread," Zander said, and his stomach growled in agreement, making them both laugh. "Thank you. This is very kind. Come in, please. Tell me about the farm while I make tea." Gora settled into the sturdy chair he indicated, the one he used for larger customers, and launched into a description of her work. She spoke with enthusiasm about cleared fields and planted crops, about the chicken coop she had repaired, and the goats she had bought from a farmer 5 miles east. Her eyes lit up when she talked about the land, about watching things grow, about the simple satisfaction of physical labor that built something instead of destroying it. Zander made tea and cut slices of the bread, slathering them with butter from his cold box, and they ate together while Gora talked. He found himself fascinated by her stories, by the sheer determination it must take to transform an abandoned farm into a working homestead with no help and no experience. "It sounds like you are doing well," he said when she paused. "The village is talking about you, you know." "Not all of it is negative. I know, I hear them when I come to town." Gora took a sip of her tea. "They are not ready to accept me, but they are not chasing me away either. That is something, and your dresses help. When I wear them, they see me as less of a threat." "It is strange how much difference cloth makes." "Clothing is powerful," Zander agreed. "It tells the world who we are or who we want to be. You want to be a farmer, a neighbor, someone peaceful. The dresses help you tell that story." "Then I need more of them," Gora said. "The gray one is wearing out from work, as you can see. I need at least 2 more for everyday use, and I would like another nicer one for when I come to town. Something different from the blue." "What color were you thinking?" "Green, perhaps, but not the same shade as my skin." "Something darker, richer, like forest leaves in summer." "I can do that. Deep green with maybe a hint of brown. It will look lovely on you." Zander pulled out his order book and began making notes. "Same style as the blue dress. Yes, it is comfortable and I like how it looks." She paused, then added shyly, "You were right. I do look beautiful in it, At least, that is what the cobbler said when I went to pick up my boots. He seemed surprised by his own words. Zander felt an odd surge of jealousy at that, which was ridiculous. He had no claim on Gora's affections. She was a customer, a friend perhaps, but nothing more. Still, he did not like the idea of Petter or anyone else noticing her beauty. "You are beautiful in anything," he said, more sharply than he intended. "The dresses just help others see what was always there." Gora's eyes widened and that flush rose in her cheeks again. "You keep saying such things. Why? Because they are true." Zander met her gaze steadily. "And because I think you need to hear them. You have spent your whole life being told you are a monster, a savage, something to be feared. But you are none of those things. You are brave and hardworking and kind. You are trying to build a life in a place that does not want you, and you are succeeding despite all odds. That is remarkable. You are remarkable." Gora stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. For a moment Zander thought he had offended her, that he had gone too far. But then she spoke, her voice thick. "I should go. The goats need to be fed and I have work to do before dark. But thank you, Zander, for the tea and the words. Both mean a great deal to me." "Come back in 2 weeks," Zander said. "I will have the new dresses ready." Gora nodded and left quickly, and Zander was left alone with empty teacups and half a loaf of the best bread he had ever tasted. He sat for a long time, staring at the door she had vanished through, trying to understand the tangle of feelings in his chest. He was attracted to her. The realization hit him like a bucket of cold water. He, Zander Marlowe, human tailor of respectable family and decent reputation, was attracted to an orc woman. It was madness. It was taboo. Interspecies relationships were not just frowned upon, they were actively condemned by both human and orc societies. There were stories of such pairings, always ending in tragedy, always held up as cautionary tales. But Zander could not help what he felt. Every time Gora walked into his shop, his heart raced. Every time she smiled at him, shy and uncertain, he wanted to make her smile more. He loved hearing her talk about her farm, about her dreams, about the future she was building. He admired her strength, not just physical but emotional, the sheer courage it took to leave everything she knew and start over in a place that hated her. He was falling for her, he realized, with equal parts terror and wonder, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The next 2 weeks were torture. Zander threw himself into making Gora's dresses, pouring all his confused emotions into every stitch. The green dress he made with particular care, using a fabric he had been saving for a special project, a rich deep green linen with a subtle sheen that caught the light. He added delicate embroidery at the neckline and cuffs, leaves and vines worked in darker green thread. It was perhaps the finest work he had ever done. The 2 practical dresses he made in brown and dark gray, both sturdy and reinforced, designed to withstand the rigors of farm work. But even these he made with care, ensuring the fit would be comfortable and the construction solid. When Gora returned, right on schedule, Zander's hands did not shake. He had made a decision during those 2 weeks. He would tell her how he felt. It was insane and probably suicidal, but he could not keep pretending this was just a tailor serving a customer. This had become something more, at least for him, and he needed to know if she felt the same. But first, the dresses. Gora tried on each one and each fit perfectly, and she looked so happy that Zander's resolve nearly crumbled. How could he risk this friendship, this tentative connection, by confessing feelings she might not share? When she tried on the green dress, though, all his doubts vanished. She looked absolutely radiant. The color brought out warmth in her skin, and the embroidery added a touch of elegance that made her look like nobility. She stared at herself in the mirror Zander had set up, her fingers tracing the embroidered vines with something like awe. "This is too fine," she whispered. "I cannot afford something like this." "The price is the same as we agreed," Zander said. "The extra work was my gift." "Why?" She turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. "Why do you keep giving me such kindness? I am nothing to you. I am not even your people." "You are everything to me," Zander said, and the words came out before he could stop them. "Gora, I need to tell you something. I know it is madness. I know it is impossible, but I cannot keep pretending. These past months, getting to know you, watching you build your life here, seeing your courage and kindness and strength, I have developed feelings for you. Deep feelings. Romantic feelings. And I understand if you do not feel the same, if the very idea disgusts you, but I had to tell you. I had to be honest." The silence that followed was the longest of Zander's life. Gora stared at him, her expression unreadable, and he braced himself for rejection, for anger, for mockery. Instead, she started crying. Not delicate tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her powerful frame. She sank down onto the floor, heedless of the fine dress, and put her face in her hands. Zander rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "I am sorry, I am so sorry, please do not cry. Forget I said anything, we can pretend this never happened." "You do not understand," Gora choked out between sobs. "I feel the same. I have felt the same for weeks now, but I thought it was hopeless. I thought you could never care for someone like me. I am an orc, Zander, a monster. You should not want me, but I do." Zander reached out tentatively and took one of her hands in both of his. Her hand was huge, rough with calluses, and he loved the feel of it. "I do want you. I think you are beautiful and brave and wonderful. Your being an orc does not change that. It is part of who you are, and I care for all of who you are." Gora looked up at him, her face wet with tears, and something in her expression cracked open. "I never thought I would have this. Love, romance, companionship. Orcs do not have courtship like humans do. We have blood bonds and war pacts, alliances built on strength and mutual survival. But love, the kind of love the human stories speak of, I did not think that was for me." "It is for everyone," Zander said softly. "Everyone deserves love, you most of all." "What do we do?" Gora asked, and she sounded lost. "If we pursue this, both our peoples will condemn us. Humans will call you a traitor, a deviant. Orcs, if they hear of it, will call me weak, corrupted. We will be outcasts together." "I am willing to risk that if you are," Zander said. "I do not care what others think, I only care about you." "I am willing," Gora whispered. "More than willing. I want this, Zander, I want you, but I am terrified. So am I." He smiled at her, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "But perhaps that is a good sign. The best things in life are usually terrifying." Gora laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy and relief. Then, slowly, carefully, she leaned down and kissed him. Her lips were warm and soft, and the small tusks were barely noticeable, just a slight pressure against his upper lip. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and Zander answered by kissing her back with all the emotion he had been holding inside. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Gora touched her forehead to his, and they stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure it out together," Zander said. "One day at a time, I will come visit your farm. You will continue coming to town. We will be careful, but we will not hide. Let them talk. Let them gossip. We are not doing anything wrong." "All right," Gora agreed. "Together then. One day at a time." She changed back into one of her practical dresses and bought all 3 new ones, insisting on paying the full price despite Zander's protests. Before she left, she kissed him again, soft and sweet, and Zander felt like he was flying. The next weeks fell into a new rhythm. Zander began visiting Gora's farm in the evenings after his shop closed. The first time he made the 3-mile walk north, his heart pounded with nervousness and excitement. What if she had changed her mind? What if this had been a moment of madness they would both regret? But when he arrived, Gora met him at the door with a smile that banished all doubts. She gave him a tour of the farm, showing him the fields where wheat and barley were growing in neat rows, the vegetable garden she had planted near the house, the chicken coop with its 6 fat hens, the pen where 3 goats bleated and chewed their cud. She was proud of what she had built, and rightfully so. In just a few months, she had transformed an abandoned property into a working farm. The house itself was small but sturdy, a 2-room building with a main living area that served as kitchen and sitting room and a bedroom in the back. Gora had furnished it simply, with a large bed that could accommodate her size, a table and chairs, a stone hearth for cooking. It was not fancy, but it was clean and comfortable and unmistakably home. "I am not much of a cook yet," Gora admitted as she made them dinner. Simple stew with vegetables from her garden and bread she had baked that morning. "But I am learning. It is harder than combat, I think. At least in combat, if you make a mistake, you know immediately. With cooking, you do not know until you taste it, and by then it is too late." Zander laughed and assured her the stew was delicious, which it was if a bit oversalted. They ate together at her small table, their knees touching beneath it, and talked about everything and nothing. Gora told him about her life before, about growing up in a clan where strength was the only currency that mattered, where she had fought her first battle at 12 and killed her first enemy at 14. She spoke of the weariness that had grown in her over the years, the sense that there had to be more to life than endless violence. Zander told her about his father, about learning the tailor's trade, about the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful with his hands. He spoke of his loneliness after his father's death, of running the shop alone, of the sameness of his days before she had walked into his life. As the evening deepened into night, Zander reluctantly said he should head back to the village. Gora walked him to the road, and they stood in the darkness, moths fluttering around the lantern she carried. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "This was the best evening I have had in longer than I can remember." "The first of many, I hope," Zander replied and kissed her good night. He floated all the way home, despite the darkness and the long walk. The visits became regular. 2 or 3 times a week, Zander would close his shop and make the walk to Gora's farm. Sometimes he would help her with chores, carrying water or feeding the animals, though he was laughably weak compared to her, and she often finished tasks in minutes that would have taken him hours. Other times they would simply sit together, talking or reading or enjoying the quiet. Gora came to town weekly for supplies, always dressed in one of her fine dresses, always polite and careful. The villagers were slowly, grudgingly, starting to accept her presence. A few had even begun nodding greetings when she passed. It was not much, but it was progress. They were careful not to show affection in public. Zander would greet her in his shop with professional courtesy, and Gora would conduct her business and leave. But their eyes always lingered, and anyone paying close attention might have noticed the warmth between them. Summer gave way to early autumn, and the crops Gora had planted began to ripen. She hired some day laborers from a neighboring farm to help with the harvest, paying them well, and soon her storage shed was full of wheat and barley. She sold some at the market and kept the rest for her own use and for seed next spring. She was proving, slowly but surely, that she could make a success of this farm. Zander's business was doing well too. Word had apparently spread that he had made clothing for the orc woman and had done good work, because a few other unusual customers came by. a half-elf traveler needing a cloak, a dwarf seeking to have human-style clothes made. Zander's reputation as a tailor who could work with any body type was growing. It was a golden time, those autumn weeks. Zander was happier than he had ever been. Gora was thriving, her farm was successful, and their relationship was deepening into something solid and real. He loved her. He knew it with absolute certainty, and she loved him. She said it often in those quiet moments at her farm, her voice rough with emotion, like the words were precious and fragile. Then winter came, and with it, trouble. The first snow fell in mid-November, and Zander made the walk to Gora's farm bundled in his warmest cloak. The world was beautiful under its blanket of white, silent and peaceful. But when he reached the farm, he found Gora pacing in her yard, her face dark with anger and worry. "What is wrong?" Zander asked immediately. "Someone has been here," Gora said, pointing to tracks in the snow leading up to her house. "Several someones from the look of it. They came while I was in town yesterday. They broke into my shed and destroyed half my stored grain." "Just destroyed it, scattered it on the ground where it will be ruined by the snow and rot. And they left a message carved into my door." She led him to the front door, and Zander felt his blood run cold when he saw what was written there, crude letters gouged deep into the wood. "Go home, monster." "Who would do this?" Zander demanded, fury rising in him. "I have my suspicions," Gora said grimly. "There are some in the village who have never hidden their hatred. Young men, mostly, who see me as an insult to the memory of the war, but I have no proof, and even if I did, what could I do?" "Go to the village elders. They would probably thank whoever did this." "This is wrong," Zander said, his voice shaking with anger. "This is property destruction, it is cruelty. You have done nothing to deserve this." "I am an orc," Gora said flatly. "That is crime enough for some." Over the next weeks, the harassment continued. Gora's fence was broken in 3 places, allowing her goats to escape. She found them eventually, but it cost her a full day of work. One of her chickens was killed and left in her yard, its neck broken. The well she drew water from was fouled with offal, forcing her to clean it out and boil all her drinking water for days. Zander was beside himself with rage and helplessness. He tried to investigate, asking carefully around the village who might be responsible, but no one would talk. The law in these frontier villages was loose at best, and the part-time constable, an old man named Gareth, made it clear he had no interest in pursuing crimes against that orc woman. "She should leave," Gareth said when Zander confronted him. "She is not wanted here." "The sooner she understands that, the better for everyone." "She has every right to be here," Zander shot back. "She bought that land legally. She pays her taxes. She has done nothing wrong." "She exists," Gareth said coldly. "That is enough." Zander left before he said something he would regret. But the encounter left him shaken. The village he had grown up in, the place he had always considered home, suddenly felt hostile and ugly. Things came to a head one night in late December. Zander was at Gora's farm, and they were sitting by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, when they heard the sound of horses outside. Multiple horses and men's voices, loud and aggressive. Gora was on her feet in an instant, her hand going to where her sword would be if she still wore it regularly. But her weapons were in the bedroom, and there was no time to get them. The door burst open, and 6 men strode in, all of them young, all of them armed with clubs and knives. Zander recognized them. Marcus Jenner and his friends, troublemakers who spent more time drinking than working, who had lost older brothers and fathers in the war and had never forgiven or forgotten. "Well, well," Marcus said, his eyes going from Gora to Zander and back again. "Look at this, boys. The rumors are true. Our tailor has been bedding the monster." "Get out," Gora said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is my home. You have no right to be here." "We have every right," Marcus spat. "This is human land. You have no claim to it, no matter what paper you bought. And you definitely have no right to corrupt one of our own." "Zander came here of his own free will," Gora said, stepping between the men and Zander, shielding him with her body. "I have forced nothing." "You forced your presence on our village," another man, Tam, said. "You forced us to see your ugly face, to smell your stench, to pretend you are anything other than a monster. And now we find out you have been poisoning young Marlowe's mind, turning him against his own kind." "No one has poisoned my mind," Zander said, trying to step around Gora, but she kept herself firmly between him and the intruders. "I care for Gora because she is kind and good and hardworking. You are the ones who should be ashamed, breaking her property, harassing her, invading her home." "We are trying to drive her away," Marcus said, "since you and the other soft hearts in the village would not do it. But I see now we have been going about it wrong. We should not target her. We should target you." He moved fast, stepping around Gora and swinging his club at Zander's head. Zander barely had time to raise his arm to protect himself, but he was no fighter. The club connected with his forearm with a sickening crack, and pain exploded through him. He cried out and stumbled back. Gora roared. It was a sound unlike anything Zander had ever heard, primal and furious, the battle cry of a warrior who had found her enemy. She grabbed Marcus by the front of his shirt and threw him bodily across the room. He hit the wall with a thud and crumpled. The other 5 men rushed her, but Gora was a force of nature. Years of combat training took over. She dodged the first knife thrust, caught the second man's wrist and twisted until he dropped his weapon with a scream. She kicked a third man in the chest, sending him flying backwards through the open door. The fourth and fifth she dealt with in quick succession, moving with a speed and efficiency that left Zander breathless despite his pain. In under a minute, all 6 men were either unconscious or fleeing into the night. Gora stood in the wreckage of her home, breathing hard, her fists clenched. Then she turned to Zander and the fury melted from her face, replaced by concern. "Are you hurt?" "My arm," Zander gasped. The pain was intense, radiating up from his forearm where the club had hit. "I think it might be broken." Gora was beside him in an instant, her large hands gentle as they examined his arm. "It is broken," she confirmed grimly. "We need to set it and splint it. This will hurt." She worked quickly and competently, and Zander learned that she had field medic training from her years in the warband. She set the bone with one sharp movement that made him cry out, then splinted it using pieces of wood and torn cloth. Through the haze of pain, Zander marveled at her efficiency. "You need a proper healer," Gora said when she was done. "The village has one, yes. Yes, good wife Mara. But Gora, what about those men? What about Marcus? Did you kill him?" "No, he is breathing. They will all live, though they will be sore for days." She looked down at her hands and something like horror crossed her face. "I hurt them. I used violence. I swore when I came here that I would leave that life behind, but at the first test I reverted to what I was, a warrior, a killer." "You defended us," Zander said urgently, reaching out with his good hand to touch her face. "You defended yourself and me. That is not the same as what you left behind. You did not seek out violence. They brought it to you." "But I enjoyed it," Gora whispered, and there were tears in her eyes. "For a moment when I was fighting them, I felt alive in a way I have not felt since I left my clan. The battle rush, the clarity of combat. I enjoyed hurting them." "That does not make you a monster," Zander insisted. "It makes you someone who has been shaped by their past." "But you chose to leave that past. You chose peace. One moment of defending yourself does not erase that choice." Gora gathered him carefully into her arms, mindful of his broken arm, and held him close. "I am so sorry you were hurt. If I had been faster, if I had my sword closer, I could have stopped them before they touched you. It is not your fault. None of this is your fault." Zander rested his head against her shoulder, exhaustion and pain washing over him. "We need to decide what to do. Marcus and his friends will not let this go, and now the whole village will know about us." "Let them know," Gora said fiercely. "I am tired of hiding. I love you, Zander. I will not pretend otherwise, no matter who it offends." "I love you too," Zander said, "but I am afraid of what this means for both of us." They sat together in the quiet house, holding each other, while the fire burned low and the winter wind howled outside. Eventually, Gora helped Zander onto her bed, and she lay down beside him, her warm bulk a comfort in the darkness. In the morning, Zander insisted on returning to the village despite Gora's protests. His arm throbbed with pain, but he needed to face this situation head-on. Gora came with him, dressed in her finest dress, the blue one, walking beside him as they made their slow way down the snowy road. The village was buzzing with news when they arrived. Marcus and his friends had made it back the night before, battered and furious, and they had told their version of events. The orc woman had attacked them without provocation, had nearly killed Marcus, had seduced the tailor into defending her. Zander and Gora went directly to the home of the village elder, a woman named Constance Hale who had led the community for 20 years. She received them in her sitting room, her face grave as she took in Zander's splinted arm and Gora's defensive posture. "Tell me what happened," Constance said, and Zander did. He left nothing out. The months of harassment Gora had endured, the property destruction, the invasion of her home, Marcus's attack on him. He spoke clearly and calmly, despite the pain and fear. When he finished, Constance was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Marcus and his friends tell a different story." "They are lying," Zander said flatly. "They came to Gora's home armed and attacked us. She defended herself and me. That is the truth." "And your relationship with this orc woman, is it true that you have been intimate?" Zander felt his face burn, but he met Constance's eyes steadily. "I love her. We are together, yes. And before you say it is wrong or unnatural, I will tell you that Gora is the best person I know. She is kind and hardworking and honest. She makes me happy. My being human and her being orc does not change that." Constance looked at Gora. "And you, what is your side of this?" "I love him," Gora said simply. "I came here seeking peace and a new life. I have worked hard, paid my taxes, bothered no one. I did not seek conflict. But if I am attacked, I will defend myself and those I care for. That is all I have done." "You broke Marcus's ribs and Tam's wrist," Constance pointed out. "2 other men have concussions. That is more than simple defense." "They came to my home with weapons and violence in their hearts," Gora replied, her voice steady. "I used the minimum force necessary to protect myself and Zander. I could have killed them all easily. I chose not to. Does that not count for something?" Constance sighed heavily. "This is a mess. The entire village is divided. Half think you should be driven out, the other half are willing to give you a chance. And now we have violence and broken bones and a forbidden relationship in the middle of it all." "Forbidden by whom?" Zander demanded. "Show me the law that says a human and an orc cannot care for each other. Show me the rule that says Gora cannot live peacefully on land she legally purchased." "There are laws, and then there are customs," Constance said. "And customs in these borderlands are often stronger than laws. You are asking this village to accept something that goes against generations of fear and hatred. That is not something that happens overnight." "I am not asking the village to accept anything," Gora said quietly. "I am asking to be left alone to live my life." If they cannot give me their acceptance, at least let them give me their indifference. But I will not tolerate attacks on my property or my person, not any more. And if Marcus and his friends attack again, Constance asked, will you kill them? I will defend myself, Gora said. Beyond that, I make no promises. Constance looked between them, her expression troubled. Finally, she said, I will speak to Marcus and his family. What they did was wrong, breaking into your home, attacking Zander. I will make that clear. But I cannot force them to leave you alone, and I cannot protect you if you continue to provoke them by flaunting your relationship. We will not hide, Zander said firmly. We will be discreet, but we will not pretend we do not care for each other. Then I pray you both survive what is coming, Constance said grimly, because I fear this will get worse before it gets better. They left her house and made their way to Goodwife Mara, the healer. Mara was a small, brisk woman in her 50s, and she tutted over Zander's arm while rebinding it with proper splints and giving him a draft for the pain. You did good work, she told Gora, inspecting the splint. Clean break, properly set. You have medical training. Field medicine, Gora confirmed. I learned to treat injuries in my warband. Then you learned well. Mara looked at them both with shrewd eyes. I have heard the gossip that you two are together. We are, Zander said, bracing for condemnation, but Mara just shrugged. Love is love. I have seen too much death and misery in my years to judge where people find their happiness. You are both adults. Neither of you are hurting anyone. The rest is noise. It was the first unqualified acceptance they had received, and both Zander and Gora felt tears spring to their eyes. Thank you, Gora said hoarsely. Do not thank me, just be careful, Mara said. Marcus and his ilk are dangerous when they feel their worldview is threatened. Watch your backs. They heeded her warning. Gora moved Zander's most valuable tools and materials to her farm, in case Marcus decided to target his shop. Zander began spending more nights at the farm than in his own home. They were preparing, though for what exactly they were not sure. The winter deepened, and the village remained tense. Marcus and his friends kept their distance, but Zander could feel their eyes on him whenever he was in town. People whispered when he passed. Some customers stopped coming to his shop. Others, surprisingly, began coming specifically because they had heard he was the tailor who had made clothes for the orc woman and had done good work. One evening in January, nearly 2 months after the attack, Gora came to Zander with a serious expression. They were sitting by the fire in her farmhouse, his arm mostly healed now, the splints removed just days before. I have been thinking, she said, about our future, about what comes next. So have I, Zander admitted. This cannot continue as it is. The tension, the threats. Something will break eventually. I want to marry you, Gora said abruptly. If you will have me. I know it is not done, human and orc joining together. I know there is no priest who will conduct such a ceremony, but I want you as my husband, Zander. I want to be able to call you that, to have that commitment between us. Zander's heart soared. Yes, he said immediately. Yes, I want that too. I want to be your husband. I want you as my wife. But how? How do we make it official when no one will recognize it? We make our own vows, Gora said. Before witnesses we trust, and then we live as husband and wife and let the world say what it will. Who would witness for us? Zander asked. Goodwife Mara, perhaps, and the cobbler Petter, he has been kind to me, and maybe 1 or 2 others, people who have shown us friendship. My mother's wedding ring is in my house, in a box under the floorboards, Zander said. I want you to have it. And I have something for you, Gora said. She went to her bedroom and returned with a small carved talisman on a leather cord. This is an orc wedding token. It is carved from the tusk of a great boar I killed in my youth. In orc tradition, the warrior carves it and gives it to their chosen partner. I carved this one myself in the shape of our farm. See, there is the house and there the fields. It represents the life we are building together." Zander took the talisman with reverent hands. It was beautifully carved, every detail precise, and it warmed in his palm as if it held Gora's life force. "It is perfect," he whispered. "Thank you." They spent the next week making quiet preparations. Zander retrieved his mother's ring, a simple silver band with a small blue stone. Gora made a special meal, using the last of her preserved vegetables and a chicken she slaughtered for the occasion. They invited Goodwife Mara, Petter the cobbler, and a farmer named Willis who lived 2 miles south and had always treated Gora with respect. On a cold, clear day in mid-January, with snow sparkling on the ground and the sun bright overhead, the 5 of them gathered in Gora's farmhouse. There was no priest, no formal ceremony, just 2 people who loved each other and 3 witnesses to affirm that love. Gora spoke first, her voice strong and clear. "Zander Marlowe, I came to this land seeking peace and a new life. I found both in you. You have given me kindness when I expected cruelty, acceptance when I expected rejection, love when I expected loneliness. You have seen past what I am to who I am, and that is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I vow to stand by you, to protect you, to work beside you, to love you for all the days of my life. I vow to build this life we have started, to tend our home and our land, to be your partner in all things. I give you this token as a symbol of my commitment, and I ask you to be my husband." Zander's voice shook as he replied, "Gora Ironheart, you walked into my shop and changed my world. You showed me courage I never knew existed, determination that humbles me, and a capacity for love that I am honored to receive. You are the strongest person I know, not because of your physical power, but because of your strength of spirit. You left everything to pursue a dream of peace, and you made that dream real through sheer force of will. I vow to stand by you, to support you, to love you through whatever comes. I vow to be your partner, your friend, your advocate, your safe harbor. I give you this ring as a symbol of my commitment, and I ask you to be my wife." They exchanged the ring and the talisman, Zander slipping the silver band onto Gora's large finger where it fit perfectly. Gora tying the leather cord around Zander's neck, so the carved talisman rested over his heart. "By the power of your own vows and the witness of your friends, I declare you married," Goodwife Mara said, smiling through tears. "May you have many years of happiness together." Gora and Zander kissed, and the 3 witnesses applauded. It was simple, unofficial, and absolutely perfect. They celebrated with the meal Gora had prepared, and the farmhouse was filled with laughter and warmth. For one afternoon, the outside world and its prejudices did not exist. There was only love and friendship and hope for the future. But of course, the outside world could not be ignored forever. News of the wedding spread, as news always does in small villages. The reaction was swift and harsh. The village elders called an emergency meeting and declared that Zander was no longer welcome in the community. His shop was vandalized, the windows broken, and his sign defaced. Customers stopped coming entirely, but Zander did not care. He moved permanently to the farm, bringing his tools and materials with him. He set up a workroom in Gora's shed and began taking commissions from travelers and people in other villages, people who did not know or care about his marriage to an orc. Marcus and his friends made one more attempt at revenge, coming to the farm in the middle of the night with torches, clearly intending to burn them out. But Gora had been expecting something like this. She had set watches, and she and Zander were ready. When the men approached, they found themselves facing not a helpless orc woman and her human lover, but an organized defense. Gora had taught Zander to use a crossbow, and he was stationed in the house with a clear line of sight to the approach. Gora herself stood in the yard, fully armored for the first time in months, her sword in her hand, looking every inch the warrior she had been. "Turn around," she called out to the men. "Turn around and leave, and I will let you live. Come one step closer, and I will defend my home and my husband with lethal force. This is your only warning." The men hesitated. Seeing Gora in her armor, radiating lethal competence, was different from attacking her in a house without weapons. Marcus took one look at her face and knew she was absolutely serious. He turned and fled, and his friends followed. They never came back. Spring came slowly to the borderlands, melting the snow and turning the fields to mud. As soon as the ground was workable, Gora and Zander began preparing for planting. They worked side by side, Gora breaking the soil with her powerful strength, Zander following behind to plant seeds. It was hard work but satisfying, and they fell into bed each night exhausted and happy. The village continued to shun them, but they found acceptance elsewhere. Travelers brought news of other mixed couples in distant places, humans and orcs and elves and dwarves who had chosen love over tradition. They were rare, but they existed, and that was enough. Gora and Zander were not alone. Goodwife Mara visited regularly, bringing supplies and news. Petter the cobbler sent word that he had told the village elders exactly what he thought of their treatment of Gora and Zander, and while it had not changed any minds, it had made him feel better. Willaz the farmer helped with the harvest when the time came, refusing payment and saying only that neighbors helped neighbors. By summer, the farm was thriving. The crops were growing well, the animals were healthy, and Gora and Zander had developed a rhythm to their days that felt natural and right. They worked together, ate together, slept together, and loved each other with a depth that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Gora said quietly, "I never thought I could be this happy. When I left my clan, I thought I was giving up any chance at a family, at belonging. But I was wrong. I have a family now. I have you." "We have each other," Zander agreed, taking her hand, "and that is everything." "Do you ever regret it?" Gora asked. "Giving up your shop, your place in the village, your easy life?" "Never," Zander said firmly. "Not once. That life was empty without you. This life, even with all its challenges, is full. I would choose you 1,000 times over." Gora pulled him close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear, two souls who had found each other against all odds, two hearts beating as one. In the months that followed, their life continued to settle into comfortable patterns. Autumn brought another successful harvest, and Gora was able to sell enough produce and grain to ensure they would have money through the winter. Zander's tailoring business, now conducted entirely through word of mouth and traveling merchants, was doing surprisingly well. He had developed a reputation as a tailor who could work with any body type, any species, and that made him valuable in the diverse borderlands. Winter arrived again, their second winter together, and it was gentler than the first. They were prepared this time, with plenty of food stored, warm clothes, and most importantly, each other. They spent the long dark evenings by the fire, talking and laughing, planning for the spring. Gora wanted to expand the farm, add more animals perhaps, maybe plant an orchard. Zander wanted to build a proper workshop separate from the house, somewhere he could work without disturbing Gora during the day. One snowy afternoon, as they worked on their plans, there was a knock at the door. They exchanged wary glances, as unexpected visitors were rare and often meant trouble, but when Gora opened the door, they found a young orc man standing there, his armor travel worn, his face uncertain. "Gora Ironheart," he said. I am Thrak Stonefist. I have traveled far to find you. I heard stories of an orc woman who had left her clan to become a farmer who had married a human. I had to see if it was true. It is true, Gora said cautiously. I am Gora, and this is my husband, Zander. Why have you come? Because I want what you have, Thrak said simply. I am tired of fighting. I am tired of the endless violence, the raiding, the bloodshed. I want peace. I want to build something instead of destroying. But I did not know how, did not know if it was possible for someone like me. Then I heard of you, and I knew I had to find you. I hoped you might teach me. I hoped I might settle here, start a farm of my own, maybe prove that orcs can be more than warriors. Gora and Zander looked at each other, and in that look, a whole conversation passed between them. They were no longer alone. They could be the beginning of something larger, a bridge between worlds, proof that change was possible. Come in, Gora said, stepping aside. Come in, Thrak Stonefist. You are welcome here. We will help you however we can. Thrak entered, his face breaking into a smile of relief and hope. And as Zander closed the door against the winter cold, he felt a deep sense of rightness. This was how change happened, one person at a time, one brave choice at a time. Gora had been the first, but she would not be the last. That winter, they helped Thrak find land, taught him what they knew about farming, introduced him to the few humans who had been kind to them. He worked hard, learning quickly, and by spring he had his own small farm started just 2 miles from theirs. Others came over the following years. Not many, but enough. A few orcs seeking peace, like Thrak, a human woman who fell in love with an orc trader, an elf who had been ostracized for defending an orc child from attackers. They were all drawn to Gora and Zander's farm, to the proof that different species could live together, could love each other, could build something beautiful despite the hatred and fear. The village never fully accepted them, but over time, the hostility faded into wary tolerance. Children grew up seeing Gora and Zander as part of the landscape, not monsters or rebels, but simply neighbors who happened to be different. New people moved to the area, people without the old grudges. Slowly, painfully slowly, things began to change. 5 years after Gora first walked into Zander's tailor shop, she stood in the yard of their farm and looked at what they had built. The house had been expanded, with a proper workshop for Zander and a larger kitchen for her increasingly sophisticated cooking. The fields stretched in neat rows, full of healthy crops. The animal pens held goats and chickens and 2 cows. An orchard of young fruit trees had been planted and was beginning to bear. But more than that, she looked at the community they had helped create. Thrak's farm was thriving, and he had married a human woman from a neighboring village. 2 other orc families had settled nearby, drawn by the promise of peace. A trading post had been established where people of all species could meet and do business without fear. It was small, fragile, but it was real. Zander came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his head against her broad back. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking that I made the right choice," Gora said softly. "When I traded my armor for a dress, when I walked into your shop, when I chose love over war, I am thinking that we have built something beautiful." "We have," Zander agreed, "and we will keep building it for as long as we have." They stood together in the golden afternoon light, 2 souls who had defied tradition and expectation, who had chosen love despite the cost, who had proven that peace was possible even between the most unlikely of allies. The world would change slowly, grudgingly, but it would change. And Gora and Zander would be there to help it along. One kind act, one brave choice, one shared dream at a time. In the years that followed, their farm became a symbol of hope in the borderlands. People pointed to it as proof that old hatreds could be overcome, that love could bridge any divide. Gora and Zander grew older together, their hair silvering, their faces lining, but their love remained as strong as the day they first confessed it to each other in a small tailor shop. They never had children of their own, as human-orc pairing seemed not to produce offspring, but they became parents of sorts to the entire community that grew around them. They offered advice, mediation, support to anyone who needed it. Their home was always open. Their table always had room for one more. On the day of their 10th wedding anniversary, the community threw them a celebration. Humans and orcs and a few elves, and even a dwarf family came together in the yard of the farm, bringing food and music and gifts. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Gora and Zander stood in the middle of it all, holding hands, watching their friends and neighbors dance and laugh together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Gora asked. "When you were measuring me for that first dress, did you imagine we would end up here?" "No," Zander admitted. "I was too terrified to imagine anything beyond getting through the appointment alive, but I am glad I was wrong. I am glad my hands were shaking that day, because it meant I was open to something new, something that would change my life forever." "Your hands are not shaking now," Gora observed. "No," Zander said, smiling up at her. "They have not shaken in years. Not since I realized that loving you was the least frightening, most natural thing in the world." Gora leaned down and kissed him, soft and sweet, in front of everyone. There were cheers and applause, and someone started playing a lively tune on a fiddle. Zander pulled Gora into a dance, or his approximation of one, since he barely came up to her chest, and she had to bend awkwardly to hold his hands. But they made it work, laughing and stumbling and not caring who saw. As the sun set and the party continued around them, Gora whispered in Zander's ear, "Thank you. For seeing me when everyone else saw only a monster, for loving me when everyone else offered only hate, for building this life with me. You saved me, Zander Marlowe." "We saved each other," Zander replied. "That is what love does. It saves us from loneliness, from fear, from the limitations others try to impose. We saved each other, and then we saved a few more people, and now we have this." He gestured to the celebration, to the mixed crowd of species dancing together. "We have proof that love wins. Not easily, not quickly, but eventually. Always." They danced until the stars came out, until the moon rose high and silver, until one by one their guests departed for their homes, full of good food and good cheer. Finally, Gora and Zander were alone again in their farmhouse, the way they had been so many nights before. They stood on their porch, looking out at the moonlit fields, at the land they had tended and shaped and loved. "I would not change a single thing," Gora said. "Not the fear, not the pain, not the struggle. It all led here to this moment, to this life, to you." "Neither would I," Zander agreed. "You are my home, Gora. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They went inside, closing the door on the night, secure in the knowledge that they had built something that would last beyond them. Their love had been the seed, but the community that grew from it would be their legacy. In a world that tried to keep them apart, they had chosen to be together. In a society that condemned their love, they had celebrated it. And in doing so, they had changed the world, one brave choice at a time. 20 years after Gora first walked into Zander's tailor shop, she woke one morning to find Zander still asleep beside her, his breathing slow and peaceful. She watched him for a long moment, this human who had given her everything, who had loved her when she did not think she could be loved, who had stood beside her through every challenge and celebrated every victory. His hair was completely silver now, and there were deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His hands, which had once shaken so badly when measuring her, now lay still and sure on the blanket. He was beautiful to her, more beautiful than he had been at 25, because now his face told the story of their life together. Gora was older too, her black hair streaked with gray, her green skin beginning to show the signs of age. But she was content. She had lived more in the last 20 years than in all her years before, and every moment had been worth it. Zander stirred and opened his eyes, smiling when he saw her watching him. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning, husband." They rose and began their daily routine, as familiar now as breathing. Feeding the animals, checking the crops, preparing breakfast. But everything they did together, a partnership so complete it was hard to remember a time when they had been separate people. As the years continued to pass, their story became legend in the borderlands. Young couples, human and orc in every combination, would travel to their farm to ask for advice, for blessings, for proof that love could conquer prejudice. Gora and Zander welcomed them all, offering wisdom earned through hard experience and love that never diminished. They grew old together, supporting each other through the aches and pains of aging, through the losses of friends and the joy of seeing the community continue to grow and thrive. And when, many years later, Zander finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, Gora was holding his hand, whispering her love and gratitude for the life they had shared. She buried him in the orchard he had planted, under the apple trees that bore sweet fruit every autumn. And though her heart was broken, she knew she had been blessed beyond measure. They had been given 30 years together, 30 years of love and laughter and building a future neither had dared to dream of when they first met. Gora lived another 5 years, tending the farm, welcoming visitors, telling stories of Zander to anyone who would listen. And when her time came, the community buried her beside her husband, placing both human and orc tokens on her grave to honor the bridge she had been between two worlds. The farm passed to Thrak and his family, who maintained it as a gathering place and symbol of hope. The workshop where Zander had crafted clothes for people of all species was preserved as a memorial. And the story of the orc woman who traded her armor for a dress, and the tailor whose hands shook when he measured her, became a tale told to children of all species, a reminder that love could grow in the most unlikely places, and that courage sometimes meant setting down your sword and picking up a needle, trading war for peace, fear for hope, and loneliness for love. Their love had been the seed, the community that grew from it, that thrived for generations after they were gone, was the harvest. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy anyone could hope for. Proof that love, real love, the kind that bridges worlds and defies hate, never truly dies. It grows and spreads and transforms everything it touches, one brave heart at a time.